Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. With the newest expansion having come out recently, it brought a lot of new and returning fans back to the game. I hope to tackle a problem I noticed with the replayability of Elden Ring, and that being the difficulty spike that later New Game Plus runs can bring, specifically New Game Plus 7 and on. A lot of players resort to using only a few weapons that can stand up to the massive health pools of these bosses, and so I wanted to start a series of builds that are both fun and viable to play. Today's video will be the first in the series and will be centered around utilizing Blackflame. As some of you may know, Blackflame has a unique property to it. First, the Blackflame attacks do fire damage, then they will continue to do damage over time, dealing a flat percentage to the enemy. This is super helpful for these later New Game Plus runs, as it is that percentage damage will be more and more beneficial the higher the New Game Plus run you are in. This build will make use of multiple weapons and incantations that all provide this effect. Let's get started with the weapons. The primary option for this build is the Godslayer's Greatsword. Besides looking cool, it is a colossal sword that has a much higher attack speed than the other weapons in its class. Additionally, it has split physical and fire damage, though its skill is what makes it really shine. The Queen's Black Flame is a unique skill that ignites the blade in Black Flame, followed by a slash. You can also get an additional slash with a follow-up input. This skill has some insane hyper armor that is very much needed, as its biggest downside is that it's very slow and you will need a big opening to pull it off. That is where the second, much faster weapon, the Mady, comes into place. Now, I'm sure many of you are questioning how the Mady fits into a Black Flame build, and that is through the use of the Black Flame Blade incantation. This is an incantation that temporarily coats the blade in Black Flame, granting the effect to all of the Mady's moveset. When I say temporarily, I do mean it, as it only lasts 7 seconds. That is one of the shortest buffs in the entire game, but is honestly still fair, as the buff would be too strong otherwise. On the bright side, it is a super quick cast and can be pulled off many times throughout a fight, so if you have a small opening, just reapply and then wreak havoc. Even without the buff, the Mady is a super solid weapon with a fun moveset and access to the Great Ash of War wing stance, which was my go-to when using this weapon. An honorable mention is the Godkin Peeler, and it is certainly viable if it looks cool to you. It is a twin blade that is able to be buffed by Black Flame Blade and has its default skill being Black Flame Tornado, which deals a considerable area and single target damage for only 30 FP. The primary seal for this build is the Erdtree seal. This is because it gets the highest fade scaling in the game, and incantations that buff weapons, Black Flame Blade in our case, scales solely on the fade stat of a seal. But I also use the Godslayer seal in my other hand, because if I'm going to be casting a lot of incantations, I'll just switch to using both seals in order to cast them from my very high incant scaling Erdtree seal, while also getting the buff to the Black Flame incantations from my Godslayer seal. This build also has a good roster of incantations to choose from depending on how you want to play. I will go over all of the Black Flame incantations and share whatever uses I found with each, but first I wanted to go over the must-haves on this build. First up is Golden Vow. Not a Black Flame incantation, but might as well use it as it provides extra attack and defense for its duration. Next is Black Flame Protection. This is an aura buff that buffs your physical damage negation by 35% for 70 seconds. I cannot stress enough how helpful this is, as every single thing in these later New Game Plus runs hits like a truck. Lastly, for the must-haves, Black Flame Blade, as that is needed for the Mady. Now, to start with the others, we have Black Flame. This is a short-range projectile that can be charged and can do some solid damage. Its biggest downside is its short range, but it can still be a good projectile option for most of your needs. Next is Blackflame Ritual. This is a big AoE that is chargeable and can be good in situations where you're surrounded by a lot of enemies or in close quarters, as after you cast it, the flames linger on the ground, acting almost like a wall. Definitely one of the more niche spells and definitely not much of a help in a boss fight, but always nice to have as an available option. Scouring Black Flame is another chargeable projectile that shoots out a wave of black flame, and it is very good as a way of dealing with hordes, and I usually found myself slotting this one over the regular Black Flame Fireball, but if you don't mind having a lot of spells slotted, then there's no use in not having them both. Last one is Noble's Presence. This serves the sole purpose of being a get-off-me tool, and it is a shockwave that can knock down smaller enemies if charged. I would say this is definitely the worst of the bunch and does not warrant a spell slot in my opinion. If you are in high New Game Plus runs, I'm assuming you have some pretty good stats, so I will just tell you the important ones to focus on, and those are Dexterity and Faith, as the Godslayer Greatsword scales primarily off of those. The Erdtree Seal scales with just Faith, and the Mady has a pretty good Keen Infusion. Strength is the next attack stat to focus on after Dex and Faith, as the Godslayer sword has a D scaling and the Quality Infusion for the Mady provides better damage if you have the levels to spare. Armor can be anything you like, and there are some good Godskin Apostle sets if you're committed to the cosplay. I just used the Noble set as I thought it looked cool with the black flames, but feel free to use any armor depending on your defensive needs. There are many talisman options we can use, but my personal build went with the Crimson Seed +1 talisman and the Dragon Crest Great Shield talisman for the sole reason of not getting one-shot by the bosses. Then the Shard of Alexander to buff both Wing Stance and the Queen's Black Flames. For the last slot, I used the Two-Handed Sword talisman as it will buff all attacks besides the skill of any weapon as long as you two-hand it. Other good options include the Two-Headed Turtle talisman for stamina recovery and the Old Lord's talisman to increase the duration of the Black Flame buff to your weapon. For the Wondrous Physic, I slotted the Opaline Hard tier for better defenses and the Flame Shrouding Crack tier to buff all fire damage that this build outputs. This build is a good, solid, fun pick for both the base game and DLC, even at the high levels of New Game Plus. It looks cool, provides consistent damage, and has many options of spells and weapons available to it, so it is definitely worth another dive into the Shadow Realm. That wraps up the video for today. I hope it inspired a build for you, and I plan on making more videos like this, focusing on builds that can not only hold up, but are also fun in late playthroughs. If you have any ideas you want to see, or have any thoughts on the build today, please leave a comment and I'll make sure to read them all. With that, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and until next time.